You're listening to the Nonprofit State of Minds podcast, an Angel Oak Creative production.
Hey everybody, David Chatham here with Angel Oak Creative. Welcome to the latest episode of Nonprofit State of Minds, where we pick the brains of nonprofit leaders. This is our fourth season. Like many of our seasons, we've really focused this year on what's going on, what is happening in the fundraising world, in the development world, in the fundraising communications world. And today's conversation is a great addition to that. I have Derric Bakker, CEO of Derric Bakker, advancement solutions firm. So welcome, Derric.
Thanks, Chad. David, thanks for having me.
Oh, sure. My pleasure. Yeah, we're excited. Derric Bakker and Angel Oak have partnered here and there over the years and appreciate their work. Derric, I saw, like many prompts for having guests on the show, I saw Derric announce the launch of his new book recently on LinkedIn, and I thought this would make a great conversation. So thank you so much for your time today, and look forward to getting into the book and learning more about that. But first, would love to hear what's been your journey to the nonprofit sector. How did you decide or choose, or how were you led to be part of this crazy world of nonprofits?
Yeah, so I'm one of those rare folks that has been in kind of the business for pretty much my whole career.
Wow.
I had about a 2-year stint out of college where I was doing something different, but I originally I'd gone to college for pre-med actually, and but learned during that process that I didn't really like body fluids, and so I decided to pursue a career that did not involve body fluids.
That was probably a good
And
idea, right?
that just so happened that kind of took me into kind of banking and trust work. And then about a couple of years into that, I got approached by a friend of mine who I knew through church. He was on a search committee for a development director position. And he thought I would be a good fit for that. And I was just early 20s at the time, and kind of threw my hat in the ring at that time, just kind of serendipitously, and
Maybe a little naive.
lo and behold, I got the job. I didn't even really know what the job was, and
Right.
it was like, wait, fundraising, But so I've been doing this since my early 20s, and I just turned 60 last month. So you can do the math on that. It's been a little bit, but
Well, I joined that
I've
club
enjoyed
in
it.
September, so I'll be in good company at least.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, tell people a little bit about Derric Bakker. What do you all do? What's what's your work look like?
Yeah, so we're as you said, we call ourselves an advancement solutions firm, and basically we help nonprofit organizations grow and thrive, and kind of make a greater impact. We are a team of close to 60 full-time folks now, kind of around the
Wow.
country, and so we work on a wide variety of different things. Most people probably know us best for fundraising consulting. So we do a lot of fundraising. Fundraising is a big part. We have a capital campaign division, a grants division, but we also help with strategy and some talent solutions and things like that. But our client base is national. We're based right here in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yeah.
But our team works mostly virtual. We do have an office here, but our team is mostly virtual. And so that's fundraising is kind of our big thing. We help a lot of organizations with fundraising. Our overall philosophy, though, is that success is always an equation. It's never about one thing. And so, the factors on those equations typically are talented people, effective strategy, abundant resources, and a well-articulated brand. And so our brand promise. And so we kind of hone in on those things all together. But fundraising is the thing most of our clients turn to us the most for.
Well, Angel Oak loves a good brand, so we're all
Yeah.
about that. Well, talk a little bit about, tell us about the book, A Better Way to Fundraise, right? Did I get that right?
You did. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Tell us a little bit about inspired you to write the book, what that process was like, maybe a little bit, and then where you are, where the how the book can impact nonprofits.
Absolutely. So the title of the book is A Better Way to Fundraise, and the subtitle is Treat Every Donor Like a Major Donor.
Hmm.
And the book, the seed of the book was born all the way back in 2017. I tell this story in the prologue of the book, actually, where I was in an airport. I was in the O'Hare Airport in Chicago, and was flying to and back from a client. And the client was in an area where my regular airline, Delta Airlines, didn't serve. And so I was flying a different airline. You can kind of guess which one it was based on getting in and out of O'Hare.
Yeah.
But winter storm had rolled in. I found myself stranded in the airport, and I was right. I had no status on this particular airline, and
You're
I
just a
just
commoner.
I was a tourist, right? I was a nameless, faceless number being pushed through, like anybody else, and didn't have all of those things that I would normally have, like a dedicated service line and access to the club and all that sort of stuff. And I remember thinking to myself at that moment, it was kind of like, why can't airlines just treat all their customers like they're valued customers, right? Why do they have this little sliver of people that they treat like valued customers, and everybody else gets treated like a number? But soon after that, I kind of had this kind of convicting thought, and it was, we kind of do that in fundraising.
Yeah.
We kind of do the same thing in fundraising. We have this little sliver of major donors that we give a very high quality relational experience to, but then the mass, we just crank out just a bunch of stuff, and very little of it is meaningfully personalized. And today, in today's day and age, it's getting worse and worse. And so, and the irony is, there's this incredible kind of divide that I think is happening in the industry as we're seeing kind of decline in a lot of the trends and a lot of the patterns, and the costs are increasing, et cetera. A lot of organizations are saying we got to cut costs, we got to cut costs, we got to cut costs, which leads to more syndication, less customization, less personalization.
Yeah.
Very kind of like transactional mass, not paying attention to the customer.
Yeah.
At the very time that the marketplace is moving in the other direction, at the very time that donors want a more personalized experience, a more engaging experience. So we can talk more about why that is.
Yeah.
But we've had this, we're in this situation where kind of the fundraising models that have worked well for a long time, that have been fueling our growth for a long time, are really losing effectiveness. And not so much because they were wrong, but they were built for a world that doesn't exist anymore. And we're leaning harder into those models, efficient and scaled up versions of those models, when when basically what our customer wants is something entirely else. And so that's what this book is really about. It's like how to, and at the same time all this is happening, we have this new technology emerging, right? And so there's another little subtitle to the book, and it's how AI is basically enabling major giving to scale and changing the future of philanthropy. And that's kind of the basic idea behind the book, is making our whole fundraising program more relational, less transactional, and ironically using AI to do that.
Wow. Well, let's talk about the state of fundraising right now. What is going on? There's, it's a, I mean, you feel like you could have a conversation every year that something's different, right? But from what I hear from clients and others, and what it seems like you're stating, is that this really is different, right? That there is something going on that is changing the way that donors think, the way that fundraisers are acting, or maybe should act. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, and you probably the same thing. You've lived through a few decades, and as fundraisers, as nonprofit leaders, we're used to seeing kind of ups and downs and cycles, and we're used to kind of working and managing our way through cycles. And sometimes they're economic cycles, but other cycles that happen. there's something different about what's going on today. And I think if you talk to most people in the industry, they have a hard time putting their finger on what it is, but almost everybody will tell you that something just feels off. It's there's this misalignment, this right. It's just things aren't working the way that they used to. That fundraising is getting harder. It's more expensive. It's less effective. Teams are burning out. I use the analogy of a hamster wheel. We're running faster and faster, and not getting kind of forward momentum. And I think what I'm sensing is, I alluded to this earlier, that we're kind of using the wrong approach. That the approach that the marketplace has changed, the world has changed significantly, but the old models are breaking down. And a lot of the first few chapters of my book kind of goes into the background of that, about how fundraising kind of grew over the years and expanded over the years, and really leaned into consumer marketing principles and things like that. And 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 that hit kind of its peak. But nowadays things have shifted a lot. Giving is shrinking. Fewer people are shrinking. The middle income households are giving less for a number of different reasons. Major giving is becoming more and more important.
Mm.
And it's just, there's also some significant generational changes that are happening in fundraising. And one of the really interesting things that we have found, David, is younger donors kind of behave like major donors. Younger donors kind of want the same sort of personalized experience. They want to be engaged. They want to be involved. They want to have, right. They want to be known. They want to be seen. They want to see the impact of what they give. And so you have this whole shift happening across the industry.
Yeah.
And we just really haven't caught up to it. And to a large degree, we haven't figured out how to catch up to it. And that's kind of what this book gets into.
Talk about the mindset of fundraisers right now, of development people, advancement people. What are they thinking, and maybe what should they be thinking? What did you learn as you were writing this book?
I think the mindset is just all it's like always urgent.
Yeah.
It's always urgent. There's this sense of urgency that everybody is scrambling.
So hard.
There's a different quadrants, about what's important, what's urgent, what's needed now, it just seems like everybody's just always running 110%, trying to kind of keep up, trying to stay ahead.
Yeah.
I do think that here's a remarkable thing. We did a survey a couple of years ago, and we surveyed hundreds of nonprofit leaders. And what we heard back from those folks that we surveyed was 94%. 94% of the people that responded to the survey kind of recognized that fundamentally we had to change the way that we fundraise. And the vast majority of them want to do more major giving, become better at kind of relational fundraising, things like that. But also at the same time, the vast majority of them were kind of stuck doing the same things that they've always done, right? And so there's not enough. There's not a lot of margin to try new things. There's not a lot of time to try new things, and it's kind of like we're so kind of on this, again, hamster wheel or this treadmill.
Yeah.
That it's just everybody's stretched really thin and just scrambling and having a hard time, and it's unfortunate.
What do you think it's going to take for fundraisers to change that mindset? To get to that place where they're ready to try something different, maybe to read your book, maybe to say, okay, there's a different, there may be a better way to fundraise, right?
Right. Yeah. I think that a key part of it is just recognizing where we are, right?
Yeah.
That more of the same isn't going to change. There's a quote in there from Albert Einstein, right? The solutions that got us into this situation aren't going to be the same solutions to get us out of it.
Yeah.
this idea that I think we're stuck in this paradox.
Mm.
The situation I kind of described is kind of a definition of a paradox. And so when you encounter a paradox, you got to kind of look at it and say, wait a minute, what can we learn from this? And I really think there's a moment. I think that a key part of it is just stepping back from the busyness of every day and just kind of like the routines. We really get into these routines. So many organizations, when they're setting next year's budget and next year's plan, it's kind of taking a lot of what we did last year and just do it again, do
Yeah.
it again. And I think that we need to really look at, hey, what, on the bigger picture and the larger kind of scale of things, what's going to work for the future? If we really wanted to, we inherit all of these things. Whether you step into a new job or,
Yeah.
right, you inherit so much. You inherit kind of all of the events that have been going on for years. You inherit the people. You inherit a lot of the activities. You inherit the budget. You also inherit a lot of the assumptions.
Yeah.
You inherit, right, a lot of that. And I think sometimes just to stop and say, if we didn't have all of this stuff that we inherited, if we were going to build a fundraising program for the future, for today's donor, for tomorrow's donor, how would we build it different?
Mm.
And I think we're not having that discussion in our sector, in our industry enough. I think a lot of it is just, I want you to do everything that you've been doing. I want you to do it at less cost, and I want you to raise more money.
Yeah.
Right? It's like we want more stuff, we want more activity, but we need to do it for less cost. And oh, by the way, we expect it to raise more money. I mean, how many times don't you essentially hear that either from clients or from boards or from leaders? It's kind of like,
yeah. And when what's interesting, or, I don't know if it's interesting, but what seems to be the case is that the need is greater than ever. Right.
Exactly.
I mean,
right.
We're seeing most of our clients have exponentially increased demand for their services, right? So
Right.
is it, how wise is it to cut the resources that you have to raise money for programs that have to expand in order to meet the need of the community? And I get it, right? I mean, I understand, I don't take it for granted that whether it's boards or whomever wants to be great stewards of those funds and to do all those things. And I think that's admirable. And, it also is counterproductive, right? I think, to look at it through the lens of, final dollars and not final impact, right?
Right, absolutely. And I'm a big proponent of, ROI, making sure
Right.
that you're getting a good ROI on the money that you invest. One of the things is that, we have to stop thinking of fundraising as an expense
Mm.
and start thinking of it more as an investment.
Mm.
When you think about all the things that you're going to, as a nonprofit organization, that you're going to spend money on, which of those things are going to actually multiply and give you more revenue?
Yeah.
It's only basically, one thing,
Yeah.
unless you're fee for service right? If your services are fee for service, but, you can start a program, you can invest, you can hire people, you can do a lot of different things. But the one thing that you can put money into and actually get money from, right? And if you're, the average industry, return on investment for $1 invested in fundraising is 28 cents, right? So the average cost to raise $1 across the country in the industry is 28.5 cents.
Right.
And so if you think about that, if you can put 28.5 cents into a machine, pull that lever and get $1 out, I mean,
stay there all day, right?
you can do it all day. Now, the challenge is that a lot of folks have struggled to find the right investment mix, to find the right, and they may put.
I mean, is it fair to say that, and to give it time to work?
And yeah, so first of all, to have a good strategy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, too often this is very much a people-driven business,
Yeah.
and so too often people get thrown into a job or take a job or are hired to do a job that they're not necessarily equipped to do, That's one of a, that will probably be my next book, actually, about building teams and talent, because,
Yeah.
so many, you probably see this as well as an agency, but so many people come to us for help with fundraising. And what becomes pretty apparent is that they don't have a lot of their issues are not with fundraising. It's on the people side, right?
Yeah.
Either they don't have enough people, or they don't have the right people, or they're
Yeah.
right. They've got, their folks are not performing at full, right, at full potential. And a lot of times it's either you don't have the right people in the mix, right? You can have, even within fundraising, so you can hire somebody to do a job in fundraising, and they can have been very successful in a fundraising job and be a very bad fit for the job, for the fundraising job they're in. Let me give you an example of that, right? I worked with an organization that was kind of a startup. It was a, they were really, kind of starting up. They were seeing some good success. We had helped them kind of, start up a whole plan. They kind of spun off of a large organization, started their own thing, had a little money to start with from the larger organization, but had to build their own fundraising program. And the nature of this organization was that was going to be largely built by major gift fundraiser, or by major giving. Just the nature of the type of organization that they were. Well, they hired somebody who had a lot of experience in major giving, but the person that they hired had a lot of experience in higher ed major giving,
A different
right?
animal, right?
A very different animal, right? So higher ed major giving is you're meeting with alumni. You have your assigned list. You're oftentimes in a region or an area, and you're not out there hunting, right, for new, right, turning over rocks and trying to source and trying to
Cold calling,
network and
right?
right, cold calling, but particularly, networking and getting people to host events and things like that. It's a very different environment, but it also
Yeah.
requires a very different skill set, right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, that person didn't do well, but it was largely because, right, the experience and the individual wasn't the right fit for what they needed it to
Right.
do. It wasn't just about title. And
Well,
so I think the people part of the equation is really an important part of the equation. It's also why a lot of people struggle when they invest into fundraising and it doesn't work. You get into that situation of, well, we tried it, it didn't
yeah.
work.
Well, let's talk about what works. Let's talk about the Better Way framework here and what that looks like from the book. Why is it a better way? What is it about it that makes it a better way compared to past ways or other ways? Or
Yeah. Well, I've I've been in fundraising for, do the math, about 6 years, 38 years, something like that. We'll just say a few decades.
yes,
And I've been kind of on both sides of kind of the fundraising, you know um, organizational chart. You have your kind of marketing based fundraising, and then you have your major gift fundraising, your relationship based fundraising. When you look through kind of historically, and when you look at kind of what works and what doesn't work, the best kind of fundraising out there, the most effective fundraising, is relationship based fundraising.
mm,
I don't think anybody would argue that relationship based fundraising is the most effective fundraising, bar none,
mm,
regardless of what time we're in. Right? If you have two people on a footing of trust, and one person believes in something and the other person has an affinity to that cause, and that you ask that person for money personally, you're going to get a lot higher. Every metric is higher, right?
right,
Your close rate is higher, your engagement rate is higher. So bar none, right? Relationship based fundraising, is going to be a better and more human, frankly, type of fundraising than any other type of fundraising. The reason we have not been able to extend relationship based fundraising in mass has always been capacity,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's always been capacity. So if an organization has 10,000 donors, they're going to peel off their top few percent
yeah,
for relationship based fundraising. and then everybody else is going to get kind of mass market treatment. Well, the argument of the book basically is that we can now begin using AI and technology today. We can begin extending those behaviors, those relationship-based behaviors, to a larger scale across the board. And that is the core idea behind the book is it's built around the framework of these 7 behaviors, what we would call the 7 behaviors that, that are really just there. It's not like, oh, these radical new things. These are the basic things that major gift officers do in fundraising. And it says, how can we take these basic behaviors and begin to extend that using technology, using AI over a larger set of donors? And it's not like now we're going to take 10,000 people out for coffee, right? That's not the idea, right? But one of the things, for instance, as an example, the first of the 7 behaviors is listen, right? Mm-hmm. Listen first. When I got into fundraising, I had the privilege of learning from a fellow by the name of Jerry Panis. A name may ring a bell to you, or for sure to some of your listeners. And Jerry was kind of a legend in the old days, but he's one of the most prolific authors, and still to this day. He passed away several years ago, but some of his books are still some of the best sellers out there in terms of fundraising and fundraising strategy. I had the opportunity to learn from him personally. It was when I first got that job in fundraising, I didn't know a thing about fundraising. But I knew one person. I knew one person who did fundraising. And so I called him up and I asked him if he would, right, if I could shadow him and learn from him. And he said, absolutely, but he said that, I'm on the board with this guy, or he was involved in an association or a board with Jerry Panis. And he's like, you should reach out to Jerry Panis. I'll make the connection. And so I had that opportunity to kind of learn from him. And Jerry was, by far one of the biggest impacts on my career. And so that, I really learned major giving and fundraising, from him. And one of the things he would say that one of the most important skills of a fundraiser is listening. Understanding a donor's motivations, understanding what's important to them, understanding their story. Now, with major giving, we do that eyeball to eyeball, right? We sit down, we make an appointment, we have a visit, we sit over a kitchen table, or we take them out for coffee or dinner, and we ask some pointed questions and listen. Yeah. Well, how do you listen to donors in mass, right? Well, there's so many ways you can do that today with technology. You can survey them, you can pay attention to their patterns. You can collect information from outside sources. There's so many different ways that we can understand donors. We can also, right, there's even AI methodology in here to gather information, and chatbots and other things to learn about donors and understand what's important to them. And so you can also just pick up the phone and call them. But the point is, today's day and age, we have more ways of gaining information about donors than we ever have before, and kind of two-way communication with them because of technology. But we're really not using that to the extent that we could in order to get more engaged with donors.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the first questions I ask when I'm, talking to either a prospective client or new clients is, how well do you know your donors? How have you done a donor survey lately? Have you, any of those things? And, 8 times out of 10, it's, we haven't done any of that. We've never done that, or we haven't done one in the last 5 years, or, something along those lines. And, it's, again, it goes, I think there's, there's this roadblock of, well, that takes a lot of time, or, nobody wants to fill out a survey, or, those sorts of things to undertake some of that work. But you're right. I mean, I believe strongly that is such a critical part of creating a feedback loop, right? Not just yelling into the universe, but asking donors, what do you think? What is your experience? What do you care about? What is important to you? All of those things. Again, it doesn't have to be a 50-question survey, right? It could be
Right.
3
Better, it's a
surveys
short
a year
survey. Right. Yep.
that ask 3
Yeah.
questions.
All the data shows that frequent short surveys are much more effective than, right. And the
Yeah,
more frequently you survey, people start to get used to, hey, I'll answer this. But one of the things, it's probably half your listeners on the podcast are thinking to themselves, oh, we do donor surveys already,
yeah,
right? Because it's true. A lot of organizations do donor surveys. But my pushback question is, yeah, but what do you do with that data?
right,
Because what most organizations are doing with that data is they're looking at it in the aggregate. So maybe they get 100 to 200 surveys back from donors, and it says, and you're asking donors for, typically it's a perception and preferences, right?
right.
You're asking for their perceptions on you and their preferences in terms of a lot of different things.
Yeah,
And and then you run that, you cross tab that, and you say, oh, well, guess what? 60% of our donors have this preference. And you use that data then to say, we're going to start treating all of our donors in that way, right?
right,
Because that's how we do it typically, because
right.
that's what the technology mostly allowed.
Yeah,
But what we can do today, which most organizations are not doing, is taking the actual survey responses from the donor and feeding that into their individual record in the CRM,
yeah,
right? So now for each of those 200 folks that put in their preference, when you say, how often would you like to receive mail, right? Well, if 60% say we want to receive less mail, then you might say we're going to send less mail to everybody. But within that, but there's also 40% that said we want to receive more mail.
right.
Now we have the capability of feeding that survey data directly into their record in CRM and saying, this donor wants more mail, this donor wants less. This donor likes this program, this donor likes that. And
Yeah,
the more that you understand about donors, the more that you can personalize, right? That's another one of those 7 behaviors, personalize every touch point,
yeah,
right? But you got to have the information. You got to listen first to understand, right, how to personalize. But again, that's a matter of using that technology, feeding it into the system, and then using kind of AI to look at that preference data. The more preference data that you build in individual donor records, the more that you can personalize your the messaging and experience to those
yeah,
donors. And suddenly their experience starts to resemble that of a major donor. But
yeah,
rather than having an individual major donor portfolio manager doing that one-to-one, the systems are setting up now to begin to apply those kind of behaviors, that kind of mindset on a large scale,
yeah.
but in a very individualized fashion.
Yeah, and I would think there's at least some correlation. I don't know if there's a causation, but there's some correlation between kind of that moves management, right? Of once you start to personalize data, you're probably moving people closer to becoming major donors, right? So you may
Absolutely.
be. I mean, I would assume that even if they're not major donors to begin with, they start to feel like one, and then they start to give like one. I would think that would
Yeah.
be natural progression, right?
Right. And a lot of it depends on how you define a major donor too,
True.
right?
Yeah,
So I would say that a major donor is somebody that is giving what is for them a major gift,
that's a
right?
great point. Yeah,
Right? If they
yeah,
are sacrificially or giving your organization what is for their circumstance, one of their largest gifts, right? Either
yeah,
large, that's a major gift, right? And um, I'll tell you a story that's in the book. It's about a couple that I met in a feasibility study. So this was some years ago, and so I was doing. If you're familiar with a feasibility
yeah,
study, it's right. It's what you do in advance of a capital campaign, and we get brought in as consultants, and we're asked to interview some of the donors and just find out about their willingness to support the capital campaign, get their input. This particular couple had given a gift that this organization was doing a second capital campaign. We didn't do the first one. They called us in to help with the second. We're doing the feasibility study, and they had kind of identified this couple as having pretty good capacity for a significant gift to the campaign, 6 figures for sure. And they had given a gift to the previous campaign, but they had given a gift to the previous campaign for $25,000. And that had been some years ago, and their business had grown, and so as I was talking to this particular couple, and we were talking about the campaign, they began to share with me their experience in the last campaign. Okay. And their experience was that they decided that they were really going to give a stretch gift to that campaign. And, for them at the time, their business, their kids were they were investing in college. They were right. They had a growing business, and and it was like they were not in their peak giving years at that time, but this was an important organization to them, and they decided we're going to stretch and we're going to give a really significant gift, a very major gift for them, right? And the amount of that gift was $25,000. But the campaign goal was 10 million, something like that, right? So what they got as a thank you for that $25,000 gift was just a rudimentary form letter trend. Like, thank you very much. Here's your receipt. Here's your IRS receipt.
Wow.
Check it off the box, right? They were really hurt by that. I could see it. I could hear it. They were really hurt by that, right? Now, if from the organization's perspective, it was only $25,000, right? They weren't one of the big donors to the campaign. They weren't the 6-7 figure donors. So right. So, it didn't really hit their radar. Nobody picked up the phone and called them. Nobody really, right? Because it was just kind of like, it was in that middle tier of campaign gifts. But for this couple, that was really hurtful because they had made this sacrificial gift, extended themselves, and really felt like they were doing something significant. And it was for them very significant. And it was not recognized. It was not appreciated. It was not thanked. And so now here I'm back in the next feasibility study saying, hey, would you guys consider a gift of $100,000? And so how did that, right. And so, that's again one of those behaviors of the 7 behaviors. I'm giving them all away, and your readers won't even need to read the book by the time I'm done.
Plenty more to learn.
But it's express genuine gratitude, right? Gratitude is one of the biggest issues, one of the hardest issues we're grappling with in the fundraising industry today is donor retention. Donor retention numbers have plummeted. They're lower than they have been in history.
I think I heard
first donor retention
today that says first time giver retention was down to 13%.
Well, I think the last statistic I saw was 18.5.
Okay.
But
either way,
it's possible. It's been hovering in the 18 to 20%. It dropped below 20% for the first time a year or two ago, and so it's been hovering in that 18 to 20% for a while. But the trend is still downward, right? So it's and you're right. So it's possible new data's out. I may have missed it, but and then even for multi-gift retention, it's under 40%. So half of the donors, right, are giving less than, or I think it's 42% is the average, multi-year retention. So these numbers are terrible.
And on the downward trend too, right? I mean,
and on the downward trend, and but I think that the cure, and it's not just I think, we're actually proving it. I have a whole chapter in my book. I mentioned early on that the seed of this was planted in 2017.
Yeah.
So we've as a company been building our whole program around this idea, and we launched we kind of launched what we would refer to as our fundraising solutions department and the company in 2022. So now we have a few years of data working with some clients and implementing these things. And we're seeing remarkable turnaround with those clients that are implementing what we're calling the better way on retention numbers, on average gift size. And a lot of it is just the basic fundamentals of fundraising, of relationship-based fundraising, really, but for too often, gratitude is a footnote in fundraising.
Yeah.
It's basically checking off the list that you got the IRS compliance of having sent a receipt or having, a thank you letter or whatever the case may be. A lot of times it's a form letter. A lot of times it's the same form letter used for months. if we want to turn retention around, if we want to right really change the trajectory of retention, there's a couple of things we have to do. And one is we have to really make sure that donors are appreciated. We have to make sure that we are expressing genuine gratitude for, every gift. I also think we have to change our mindset. We seem to think when somebody gives us money, they are quote unquote our donor.
Yeah.
I was saying that I say in the book, I say it elsewhere. Every donor is a lapsed donor until you earn their next gift.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And if you just assume that they're going to just keep giving to you because they gave you once, that's a very expensive mistake, especially in today's generation. Today's generation, if you don't earn their next gift, you're not going to keep getting it. And we kind of get, on autopilot, assuming that, when somebody gives to us once or twice, they're going to keep on giving, so we can focus on acquiring new donors or put our attention elsewhere.
Yeah.
And you do that at your peril.
Yeah. Well, as we start to wrap up here, what would you say should be the top priority next to going out and getting your book? What should be the top priority for organizations right now to move closer to that better way to fundraise, to shift their mindset, to take on a different approach? What can be an easy kind of, or maybe not easy, but what's the logical first step to move in that direction?
It's 3 steps.
Okay.
Right. First is understand. And you mentioned read the book, but that's exactly it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the book lays it out really clearly, but understand what this concept of treat every donor like a major donor is, and understand what it is not. Understand what are those 7 behaviors. Essentially, I've built the framework around the 7 behaviors, and spell out each one out in chapter 4 of the book. But these are basic behaviors that are the essential framework of what I would call exceptional major gift fundraising. Yeah. This is relationship fundraising kind of at its core. And then, so the first is understand. First is understand what it is and how, what the approach is. And it's fundamentally a different mindset of fundraising, from transactional fundraising to relationship-based fundraising.
Yeah.
And building that at scale. And then the second is commit, right?
Yeah.
Commit to doing it. And then the third is just begin, right?
Do something,
and that's
do something,
right. Just start, and the book kind of lays out a bigger vision, but chapter 8 of the book, which is towards the end, I share a story about McDonald's back in the 70s, I think it was. It was a franchisee in the 70s in Arizona at the time, and he was very close to a big Army base. And most of his business came from that Army base. And these soldiers on the base, they would go and pick up dinner at McDonald's on their way home, or whatever the case may be. Well, the Army passed a regulation that the soldiers couldn't leave the base in uniform, right? They couldn't be out in public in uniform. So if they left the base, they had to drive home, change it out of their uniform into civvies, and then go get dinner. Well, this really started to affect this particular McDonald's franchisee's business. So he came up with an idea. I'm going to cut a window in my wall and just let people order from their cars. And that was kind of the beginning of the drive-through. It wasn't, right? It was a window that he cut in the wall. And who knew, right, that this would change a complete industry, that this would have
to get out of the car. They didn't have to be in public. They could stay in their car.
Right.
They didn't have to change. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But there was no feasibility study. There was no board meeting. There was no 5-year plan. It kind of caught on. And so, so it's kind of like you can make these shifts one step at a time. About a month or so ago, Lou Holtz, famous football coach, passed away.
Yeah.
One of the things that he used to have was this thing called the analogy, the win, right? What's important now? And And so I really like his, that basic mode of thinking, which is focus on what's important now. What are one or two things that you can do
Yeah.
to make your donor's experience more personalized, to make your donor feel more appreciated, to make your donors feel more heard,
Yeah.
right? And there's a lot of practical ideas in the book and suggestions in the book, but it's really about how do you really operationalize major giving. One of the key themes of the book is this idea of this shift of changing major giving from a department to an operating system.
Yeah.
From right to and it's amazing. I just kind of walk through some of the things that would change. Right. So yesterday's model, you know, um, fundraising being transaction driven. Major giving is an operating system, what we call a better way. It's relationship centered.
Yeah.
A lot of the fundraising communications, one size fits all. Shifting from one size fits all to individualized engagement as much as possible. Short-term focus to long-term donor value, right?
Yeah.
Thinking about the long-term value, lifetime value. Mass communications shifting to more two-way dialogue, understanding your donors, listening to your donors. Donors being passive participants to donors being meaningful partners and engaged partners.
Yeah.
And so those are all shifts kind of thinking about, okay, how do we do this? How do we do this at scale? Understanding that you cannot change everything at once, that's disruptive.
Right.
But if we do not shift, if we don't make this shift, okay.
Yeah.
And the dangerous thing, David, is people are using AI in the industry. But the fear that I have is that we will use AI to accelerate the erosion of human connection and fundraising.
Right.
And it'll all become transactionalized and robotic, and fundraising, right? It's going to accelerate the very erosion that we are trying to outrun if we allow that to happen.
There's definitely a place for it, but I think to your point,
right, there's for sure a place for it, but the place for it is to help. I'll give you an example. I've been having this conversation with a lot of different folks about major gift fundraising. What's a reasonable size of a portfolio for a major gift fundraiser?
Yeah.
When I started out in this field in 1990, the rule was about 150.
Right.
What is it today? Yeah. It's still about 150.
Wow.
Well, how crazy is that? I mean, in 1990, we didn't have email, we didn't have text, we didn't have data, we didn't have CRMs like we do.
Right.
You think about how much more efficient the work is today.
Yeah.
The day-to-day work that a major gift fundraiser does every day, day in, day out, a small fraction of that time is actually donor facing, right? The amount of time you have in donor visits is typically a fraction of your time. There's so much other work that has to happen.
Yeah.
AI can make that other work a whole lot more efficient.
Yeah.
But what AI cannot do is replace the human connection.
Yeah.
And if we do that, I think we're, those retention rates and donor, participation rates are going to go through the floor.
Yeah. Well, that's a timely warning for folks, and a timely challenge too. Tell people how they can learn more about the book, about you, and about Dickerson Bakker.
Absolutely. So the book is available on Amazon. It's called A Better Way to Fundraise by Derric Bakker. You can also get to it by going to this website, betterwaychampions.org. And that's the kind of the landing page for, essentially, I didn't write the book to sell books. I wrote the book to kind of socialize an idea and hopefully maybe even spark a movement. And so, if people are, if this resonates, right, we're inviting people to come and sign up to become a Better Way champion. But the first start to that is to get the book. But also they can visit our company's website at dickersonbaker.com. It's Baker with 2 Ks. I don't know if you put these links in the podcast.
We will.
Yeah. So it's alternatively, if you want to learn more about our company, it's dickersonbaker.com.
Awesome. Well, Derric, thank you so much. For those for spelling purposes, it's Derric, Derric, and then
correct.
Baker takes on the K that is dropped off the other. So it's
right.
Derric, Derric, and then Baker, Bakker. So,
Yep, two Ks.
Yes, and no K in the first. So,
Right.
um,
There's a story behind that, but we're out of time. We'll
I
have to
know.
next
Well,
time.
thank you. Thanks everyone for listening today. Great conversation, but just the beginning. We don't want it to stop here, so we encourage people to help your organization find the better way to fundraise, to work towards a better way. Relationships are important and critical. Angel Oak believes that, and we support that effort. So thank you, Derric, for all that you do and all that Dickerson Bakker does to make our sector stronger.
I appreciate the invitation, and look forward to doing it again.
Well, thank you. Look forward to it. Thank you, guys, everybody, for listening. Check out our previous episodes and learn more about Angel Oak Creative at angeloakcreative.com.